My husband was an overly romantic person. He loved me very much, and sometimes I would get annoyed and very tired of his endless love. I would start to struggle in his grip as he would start to get even more crazy. The intensity of his love increased. Today I was working in the kitchen when I heard the ringing of my mobile from my room, so I came to my room. My husband had also come home from the office and he had wrapped me in his arms. At that time, I was talking to my mother and was getting annoyed by my husband's flirting. The more I tried to stop him, the more crazy he was. His insults were increasing. I asked my mother to talk to me later and hung up the phone and started asking her with fake anger, "What is this method?" You can see that I am talking to my mother on the phone, but as usual, she ignored it and did not even notice that the door of the room was open. Then my wife entered the room and immediately turned back after seeing us both. Seeing all this, I got very angry. Here I was trying to prove myself to my wife. And my husband used to turn a blind eye to everything I did. Now I knew how much he would make fun of me with this. I told my husband that at this time I am working in the kitchen. You should change your habit of being romantic at this time. I do not like all this. Hearing my words, he laughed loudly, but I like it very much. I had to chase him away and came to the kitchen. Ramadan was starting from yesterday, and today it was my duty to make sehri. So I was preparing things for sehri and keeping them in the fridge so that I would not face any problems during sehri. When I entered my room late at night, my husband was sleeping unknowingly. Today I was very tired. When I thought of my husband that as soon as he entered the room, he had to make me a practice board again, I started feeling tired at the thought. Once or twice, my friend also peeked into the kitchen and asked me to help her in a casual manner, so I got very angry at her attitude. I controlled my anger and told her while smiling that I will do all the work myself. Don't worry. My friend used to do the same thing. She did not help me with any work. Earlier, I used to help her with her work and also did her share of the work myself. But now, when I saw her cleverness, I also stopped doing her share of the work. When it was her turn to do work, her annoyance would reach its peak, and then she would have a bitter argument with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law would give her my example, how Alishba too gets everything done on time, what a strong girl she is. I never had to ask her for any work. My friend would get very angry when she heard my praise and would stomp her feet and go to the room. Today, for the first sehri, I made sehri for everyone on time, according to their likes and dislikes. My mother-in-law would praise me again and again after seeing me walking around. While my friend was watching all this with a frown, seeing her attitude, I thought to myself that it was her duty to break the fast this evening, and I would not make her do a single thing. Thinking that, I was also satisfied that she would be seen in the evening. I always celebrated Ramadan with great care. I had the habit of fasting since childhood and offered prayers on time. I used to explain my acts of worship to my sister-in-law. She was a new Muslim and had just converted to Islam after marrying my brother-in-law. She did not know much about Islam, and even though she knew, she did not practice it. When I used to express my piety and humility in front of her, she would get angry at that, and when she saw my name being mentioned all over the house, she would get even angrier. After offering Fajr prayers, I recited a surah, and then I fell asleep. Today, since the duty of breaking the fast was my sister-in-law's, I was lying comfortably in my room. I was still 2 hours away from breaking my fast when my husband came home. I was angry with him. Seeing him, I turned my face away because today he had not fasted despite my repeated requests. We had been married for 2 years. Last year, I spent the entire month of Ramadan telling him to get into the habit of fasting, and he always put it off by saying tomorrow. And today when I woke him up, he had not fasted yet. That's why I was getting angry with him. I turned my face away in anger, but little did I know that my anger was going to cost me dearly. The door of the room was also slightly open. My husband, thinking of my anger, had come and sat next to me to console me. At the same time, while consoling me, his hands started crawling on my body in a strange way. Seeing this, I was scared. I knew that he didn't take long to be romantic. Then I told him that I am fasting. What are you doing? but he was going crazy. For the first time in my life, I was stopping my husband from doing this, and the reason for this was that at that time, I was fasting and knew very well about the sin that was involved in breaking the fast, but my husband was not in his senses, and then suddenly he made the mistake due to which my father was an imam in the mosque. Since childhood, the atmosphere at home was very religious. I was very close to religion since childhood. We used to emphasize on fasting and praying. Perhaps this is the reason why all this got into my head. When I was young, most of the girls of my age and classmates would get involved with the boys around here and there and get stuck with them. Some girls would even go to all lengths, because of which later, when they realized their mistake, they would come crying to me and say, "We have made this mistake. What should we do now?" After listening to the girls' stories, I started feeling as if I was the only good girl in the world, very good, who could never commit any sin. Perhaps the reason for this was that all those girls were my age and they would soon slip and fall from their position. There were many girls who would fall into the trap of boys' stories and commit major sins. But I had never even looked at anyone. It was not that I was not beautiful, but I was so beautiful that whoever saw me would keep looking at me. But I never let anyone's eyes fall on my beauty. I used to come to my school and college in a burqa, so no one would know that there was a moon-like face hidden in that burqa. Many times people tried to chase me, but they had to eat their fill because of my carelessness. I had carefully preserved my youth. As time passed, I felt proud of my good intentions and nobility. I had forgotten that this was also a blessing from Allah, that He had guided me and saved me from going astray. I should thank Him for this blessing that He had preserved my honor till now. But I did not know why I started feeling proud, without knowing that being proud is a grave sin. Satan was rejected because of his own sin. Then, on the basis of my good name and good intentions, I got married to a very good family. My in-laws were very rich. There was no shortage of money or anything in their house, and now I was also proud of my good fortune. My husband was very good, and he was very impressed with me, but his overly romantic temperament did not match my nature. Whenever I was frightened by his intensity, since I also had to take credit for being a good wife, I did not let any displeasure show on my face, and I knew my rights very well, but my husband used to use these rights freely. In those days, my brother-in-law, who was living in America for studies, told his family that he had married a Christian girl. Hearing this, everyone in the family became angry with him. Even so, my in-laws wanted my sister to marry my brother-in-law. They knew that I was very good, and my sisters were also my equals. It was my wish that my sister should come to this house, but when my brother-in-law told me this, I also had to face a lot of depression on hearing this. But I did not let anything show on my face. My mother-in-law, father-in-law, and my husband were angry with my brother-in-law that he had taken such a big decision so quickly without knowing the wishes of everyone. I married a girl who was a non-Muslim, but he kept saying that she had become a Muslim and would learn everything gradually. Then my in-laws, forced by their son's love, forgave him, and he returned forever. With him was that girl who did not fit in with the environment in any way. When everyone saw her lifestyle, her dress, and manners, they would compare her to me. My mother-in-law used to tell her to adopt a similar complexion to mine, but she would get annoyed. Perhaps this was the reason why she started giving me examples after examples, and she started getting jealous of me and started getting angry with me. I also did not let any opportunity to burn her go. I used to loudly promote my good name to her. My mother-in-law was also at the forefront of all this. She never tired of praising my good character and character. My wife was now living in the same niche as if she could find something I said on the basis of which she could disrespect me. But I never let her feel anything. Whenever we were in the room, she often used to pass around the room on excuses. She wanted to know how we were living together. I did not know what benefit she was going to get from all this, but I had started being careful. After coming into the room, I would definitely draw the curtains in front of the window and close the door so that my wife could not feel anything about what was happening in the room. I did not want her to guess my husband's mood. A maid would come for the rest of the housework, but the responsibility of cooking was the responsibility of the women of the house. Earlier, all this responsibility was on my head, but now when my wife came, my mother-in-law divided the responsibilities between us. One day she would cook, and the next day I would cook. The day I cooked, everyone would praise me, and the day my neighbor cooked, everyone would wake up hungry. Then I would smile in a meaningful way. My smile would set my neighbor on fire and she would get angry. Most of my time was spent in worship. Along with praying 5 times a day, I would also observe voluntary fasts. Often my neighbor would be surprised by this and say, "I have heard that Muslims fast for only 1 month, but you fast every 2nd or 3rd day." Then I smiled and told her that those fasts are for Ramadan. They are obligatory, and I observe voluntary fasts. After listening to me, she remained silent. Perhaps she was surprised by my words. How could someone stay hungry and thirsty for the whole day without any reason? Now, when Ramadan started, I was more excited than ever. This time, my wife was also present, and now my household responsibilities had reduced a bit because of this. I also knew that it would be very difficult for her to fast, and maybe she would get scolded by her mother-in-law for this too, when she would not be able to fast. When I lay down on the bed to rest at Asr time, I was feeling very sleepy, but seeing my husband, I sat up straight because I had no idea about his changing mood. But even my caution was of no use because he had been carried away by emotions, and despite my prohibitions, he started doing everything to me that even religion was preventing him from doing while fasting. Even after my protests and refusals, he was not giving me anything. No matter how much I tried, he was not giving me anything. And then the door opened wide. When she saw both of us, her eyes widened. You could see clear surprise in those eyes. Then this surprise was replaced by sarcasm. And she had closed the door and left, repenting and seeking forgiveness. Everyone was present outside at that time, and I was falling to the ground in shame. I could not even look up. My husband had come to terms with all this, and he too was now ashamed. He did not expect his sister-in-law to come into the room all of a sudden. My husband thought that I was ashamed because of this, but he did not know how much punishment I was going to face because of her. Because of her, my fast had been broken. And secondly, I had fallen in the eyes of my neighbor. I used to preach my goodness in front of her all the time, and now when she saw me doing all this while fasting, she would definitely tell everyone about this because she was looking for some excuse against me. And when she got the word, how could she hide it? And that is how it happened when I came out of the room. My mother-in-law, who never tired of praising me, this time was a little, she said in a loud voice, "Don't you know that doing all this during fasting is a sin? I mean, he is your husband. But couldn't you wait until iftar?" After hearing her words, my head was bowed in shame. At that time, my father-in-law and brother-in-law were also there, and they were also being looked at incomprehensibly. My mother-in-law started lecturing me on respecting fasting, and at the same time, she also told my husband well. This was the first time that I was being disrespected by my in-laws, and my brother-in-law was standing next to me laughing. Her biggest wish in life had been fulfilled. Why couldn't she be happy about this? My husband also felt very ashamed of this. He also realized what a mistake she had made, and after that, my mother-in-law's attitude towards me also changed. She started getting angry with me for some reason, which was not in my control. Now everyone started looking at me with strange, suspicious eyes. According to them, I was a sinful woman who did not even respect fasting and, led by emotions, started inciting my husband to commit this sin, even though I was not at fault in all this. Now, when my husband saw this behavior of his family towards me, he would feel sorry for himself that he should not have done all this on that day. But what could have happened now? Because of his mistake, I was left a sinner in the eyes of everyone. My husband used to apologize to me for saying that whatever happened that day was a mistake and that I would not do anything like this in the future, but I could not bear to even look at my husband's face. To please me, my husband had started obeying everything I said. He had even kept all the other fasts, and after that he had not tried to do anything like that while fasting, but still my attitude towards him was the same. Nothing he said could please me anymore. Nothing could comfort me. Because of one of his mistakes, I had fallen in everyone's eyes. I felt like I no longer had that position or respect in anyone's eyes. My husband also understood this and looked sad. All the joy of my Ramadan, all the austerities had been ruined because of one of my husband's mistakes. The fast passed like this. In conversations, my girlfriend used to mock me and laugh and say that fasting is not just about being hungry and thirsty. During fasting, one has to restrain oneself from many things, including having sex with her husband. And anyway, a person can do all this after breaking the fast. I know so much about religion. Although people taunt me for being a new convert and consider myself a mature and true Muslim, she used to tell me the same things while sitting down and coming and going, and I would bow my head to her words. This month of Ramadan had passed, but the love that was in my heart could never diminish, and now even my husband could not find the place in my heart that was reserved for him. But from all this, I had learned a lesson that a person should never be proud of his worship or his goodness, and if Allah has given him a good name, he should be grateful for it. Pride in goodness eats him up and destroys a person. I should have behaved well with my sister-in-law and told her about my traditions properly, because she was unaware of all these things, but instead I used to mock her and keep making fun of her along with my mother-in-law. Perhaps this was the reason why she too started following me, and so much jealousy and hatred started growing in her heart for me. But now that I had gained awareness and analyzed myself, I realized that I was the one who was wrong. I should never have behaved like this towards my sister-in-law. Now that I realized it, I changed my attitude towards my sister-in-law. Even if she taunted me or teased me about something, I would ignore it. Gradually, the atmosphere at home started to become more conducive for me. When my sister-in-law saw my changed attitude, she also started living with me in a good manner. That day, when she came to me, she was quite embarrassed and said to me, "I apologize to you. I showed you a lot of love. What did I do to you that was so wrong?" Hearing this, I smiled and said, "You didn't do anything that made you apologize." Then, feeling ashamed, she said, "What I did that day was wrong." When I saw both of you, I realized that your husband was forcing you, but despite this, I told everyone that you had your consent. I lied to you when you were not at fault in all this. I felt angry for a moment after hearing this, but now, since the process of accountability had begun within me, I realized that no human being is perfect. If they are lacking in one thing, then surely a human being is a combination of virtues and shortcomings. If there is one good thing in them, there must also be one bad thing. Instead of clinging to their virtues and boasting about them, they should try to overcome their shortcomings. Thinking this, I hugged my lover, and she said, "Forget what was to happen. It happened. From now on, we will both be like sisters." After listening to me, she looked at me with uncertainty and then smiled and nodded in the affirmative. Now I used to tell and teach her good things about my religion, and she also listened with great interest. She had not accepted Islam just out of love for her brother-in-law. She was really interested in Islam. But because of the atmosphere at home and our attitudes, her heart was burdened. She felt that she had made a mistake by coming into the circle of Islam. But now everything was right. The atmosphere at home had improved for me again, and my mother-in-law had also understood that I had no fault in it that day, and she had also cleared hers on my behalf. And now my husband and I were making atonement for breaking this fast.